This episode is presented by Visit Cedar City Bryan Head Tourism Bureau. Discover the art of adventure at Utah's gateway to the parks. Cedar City is within a few hours' drive from 6 different national parks and monuments, and only 30 minutes from fresh snow at Bryan Head Resort. Check out visitcedarcity.com to plan your next trip. This episode is sponsored by the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center. Dedicated to supporting local businesses and entrepreneurs, it provides resources and services aimed at fostering business creation, growth, and retention. To learn more and get involved, visit innovationcenter.cc. Hello and welcome to the Explore Local podcast presented by Visit Cedar City Bryan Head in partnership with Cedar City Iron County Economic Development, produced by Dallas Smith Media, and I'm your host, David Johnson. Well, today we have Jefferson Moss, who is the Executive Director for the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. Jefferson, I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, now you stepped into your role. How long has it been now? It was recent.
6 months, June. 7 months.
Yeah. All right. Just getting the feet wet, or I guess diving in to the fire hose, kind of, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, for those listening who aren't familiar with GOYO, and I assume a lot of those who will listen are familiar with GOYO, but for those listening, talk about who GOYO is as a whole and what your role is with the state.
I appreciate it. And again, thanks for having me. It's been great being able to be in this part of the state as well. So down here for the conference yesterday, and I always love coming down. So our role, we work directly for the governor, obviously represent the governor in helping drive economic development across the state. And really the role of GOYO is to kind of be the quarterback, right? We try to bring different groups together. That's one of the biggest things I think we do is we're a convener. We help convene, we help coordinate, we work on policy, we work on workforce, we work on economic development. But our job is really to help bring people together to be able to drive the economy forward.
Right.
And so that's really a lot of the role I have. When I came into this role, some of the things that the governor really felt strongly about is how do we create even deeper collaboration? We have a lot of entities that are doing really good things in the state of Utah. Just some examples, the Port, the Point. We've got MIDA that's doing some great things. We've got World Trade Center, EDC, Talent Ready, all these great things that are happening. But there wasn't really a tight coordination of those efforts. And so one of the things that I've tried to do is, we convene those groups together regularly and say, how can we work even better together?
Right.
To really that whole One Utah concept, right? How do we make sure that we're all rowing in the right direction and that we're sharing information? Right. And I think that's something that I've really been focused on.
I really love that description because on a microcosm, my role as an economic development director for the city and the county is exactly that. I always tell people I'm the liaison. So I work, obviously with our chambers, with our universities, with our manufacturers, with our small businesses, with our tourism office, doing this podcast. I mean, the convener is an excellent word. Everything from incentives to small business grants. It really is very holistic. You're the point person for business, and not that myself am doing all those things, but I'm connecting them with the right people. Yep. So if they have, a lot of questions because they're a high water user or sewer, I know how to connect them with. Similar to you, if there's environmental things that a company's going to have to address, well, you know who to connect them with, but they know that your office is central to that. And, I was going to save this for a little bit more on the telling, but I think I just want to kind of start with it because it really fits in line with what we're talking about here. But right before we started the podcast, you and I were talking about there's been this question among developers, site selectors, etc., about some of the changes that have happened with GOYO, changes that have happened with EDC Utah. And that question I get all the time is, what's going on with EDC Utah? What's going on with GOYO? And I really liked what you were saying, and I would love for you to kind of convey that about the relationship with EDCU, but that's one element. And I don't want to steal your thunder, but I
appreciate the question. And we have a great relationship. It's great when you have the former person in this role that runs that role, and so understands very well the purposes of both and how we can coordinate. I think there was some changes, as you know, prior to my time of not continuing that contract, and some of that was brought in-house.
Right.
And so we've hired an incredible team that we have with Lance Soph and Liesel that really have taken on that part of that role.
Yeah.
And they've been out there very aggressively helping in that process of recruitment. But we still see a very important partnership and relationship with EDC Utah. And so we've been even working even in the last month around how do we continue to play to the strengths, because there's things that we still do very well, that convener role, that connectivity role. But there are definitely things that EDC plays a very important role on. And so we've really been trying to find more ways to make that 1 + 1 = 3 concept.
Yeah.
Is that there's things they do really well, how can we support them, and vice versa. And then just creating more collaboration in terms of expectations and how we're going to work together.
Right.
And so I think we've really been trying to move more in that direction. And so I'm excited about the partnership, and Ryan, the person that's running that, is a great guy, and love working with him.
Yeah. You know, one thing that I really like that you said right before when we were talking is the site selector, recruitment, business recruitment is one element of economic development and one element of the governor's office of economic opportunity. And so speak to that a little bit more. And what do you mean by that?
Yeah, and I think, in the past, I think sometimes people would just look at us as incentives and grants, which obviously those are really important. We play an important role in that. Economic development has so much more than just that, right?
Right.
Workforce is such a critical need. And I spend a lot of my time, I still have I don't know if you know, I have 2 jobs. I actually still work within the USHE system, helping to lead commercialization, working with all of our universities around innovation, commercialization. But so many of the companies we talk to, workforce is one of their highest priorities.
Right.
Energy is one of their highest priorities. And understanding what we're doing as a state, what are our policies around that, what does our future look like? Water, that's another. Obviously, there's all these other things that are really critical. And one of the benefits of having us in the governor's office is that we're directly involved. We've got cabinet members we're working directly with, so that when a business has a question around something, we can very quickly get them connected into the right people to be able to help support that. And really, I think that's what we're trying to develop out even more as GoEO, is how do we become the but continue to develop out as the experts in these different areas, so that anytime a business has any questions, or yourself, whenever an economic development director, a city, a county, hey, I've got this question, who do I talk to? It's a very quick response, and we can get a lot more directly interconnected with these agencies.
Right. Well, I think what's interesting too about it is, generically, when people hear and understand economic development, minds always go directly toward, getting in a large manufacturer, which is important. It's a huge part of Iron County here. It's a huge part in the state of Utah. But economic development is so much more broad. I mean, one thing I always argue is that our universities are huge economic drivers.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, tourism, our small business. And one thing that I always tell people, because a lot of small businesses and people will say, well, why do you do all these incentives and things for these large businesses? What about existing businesses? And one of my responses to that is support to small business looks different than support to large business. Yes. And there's programs that we have, and actually that we work with GoEO on, to address some of those small businesses. But before we dive into some of those details of those industries, maybe talk about your office and kind of some of this new direction that you're trying to do, and how you're trying to take more of that holistic approach as the convener for the economy in the state of Utah.
Yeah. So a few things. We've made some adjustments internally with our team. Some of the people that we've been bringing on have deep experience in actually building companies, investing in companies, are very connected into the ecosystem. And for many of our small businesses, as they're starting out, having those kind of resources of people that have really been in the trenches, that have been on the ground, and know what it's like to start a company.
Right.
I did my. I share this often. I served on a city council, but the other thing I often share is I started my first company in college. I bootstrapped it with credit cards. It was a manufacturing company.
Wow.
Built it into several $1 million company, and then sold it. But having been through that experience, when I'm talking to businesses that we're engaging with,
right,
it's just having a little bit more of an understanding of what it is they've actually gone through and the types of things that they need, right? The types of support. Right. The other thing we do rely, and I appreciate you brought up higher education, but there's a lot of good programming around that. The SBDC is tied into our higher education system. Right. All these entrepreneurial programs, and there's more and more of these programs that are not for a non-traditional student, that any business can go in and gather and get some training, get a certificate around things that would really help them as they're building out their company. And for us to be able to be that quick, hey, do you know who I could talk to? I'm struggling with this thing, and be able to plug them in, even at the local level, I think is very critical. And I did want to add one other thing. I love that you hit on, obviously, travel and tourism and film is also under our office. And so much of this area, as you mentioned, is so tied into that.
Right, yeah.
What I've loved is part of my restructure within my office is I've actually brought Natalie, who's part of the travel and tourism office, is actually playing a bigger role in over all of our marketing efforts in our office, but that really brings her more into the GOEO side. Right. And I think even within our own office, there was a little bit of a silo. Mm-hmm. And so now having that broader picture of connecting all the good things that GOEO is doing, how we tie into all these other pieces, but then on the ground with our film and tourism folks down here, there's just a deeper connection there.
Yeah. Natalie's amazing. Mm-hmm. I actually worked with her for a little while when we were both in San Juan County.
Oh, great.
So she does a great job. And earlier, too, you had talked about, kind of your business development team. Mm-hmm. Not too long ago, probably around the same time that you were hired, I can't remember if it was before or after, but Jen Wakeland was hired to be our business development person down here in Southern Utah, it just really says something, because one of the things I used to complain about state government, this was, a decade ago, was if you wanted to really connect with anyone on the state that could truly do something with your voice, it felt like, I don't know what the right word is. Felt like, you had to be graced with the presence of to speak with someone. Yeah. And the way things have been these last few years is these on the ground folks. Mm-hmm. I felt like, exactly, trying to, when I was trying to communicate and see if you could maybe come on the podcast, I talked to Jen, I talked to Lance Soph, I talked to you. Mm-hmm. Like, I actually could text you and say, hey, Jeff, would you be interested in doing this? I know you're busy. That's just such a different dynamic. Good. And I think some of that has been, and I don't like to dive too much into like the political side of things, but one of the things that Governor Cox has really pushed is these rural initiatives, so that it's not just all Wasatch Front led necessarily. It's a huge economic driver, but there are economic opportunities all across the state with unique offerings that we have across the state. And that's kind of having that access to the governor's office of economic opportunity, for me, it's a night and day difference from what I used to be frustrated about.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that. And I will tell you, that's still a work in progress. Even in meetings I had yesterday down here, there's still a little bit of a perception, well, that's the state, and we don't really know how to engage. And I appreciate you bringing up Jen, and we've got Colette that's down
Colette
in this
Cox
area
as well.
And the reason that they're all over the state, and I really give props to the governor for this perception, this concept of how we get our people in the communities so that they actually understand exactly what the issues are.
Right, exactly.
They're talking to their local residents. They're talking to their city council members. They're talking to their local economic development directors on a regular basis, so they know what the needs and challenges are.
Right.
And that information is so incredibly helpful for us to get back up to the state level.
Right.
So that when you make a phone call, and I even had this conversation with somebody that said, sometimes we don't like to call the state. They just feel like this blob, it's like we want to call somebody local. And so the more our team can really be deeply ingrained in the communities, the more we want to create less distance, right? So that it does, you're already doing that obviously very well. This community is doing an incredible job. But just the more those communications can happen, it just makes the whole process much more seamless. Well,
and I appreciate that because it does take time. And that's actually a huge part of why I wanted to have you come on the podcast is I want my peers to see there is a difference, and it's just a matter of reaching out. Now the reach out isn't too far of a stretch. You just put out your hand and there's someone to help you along the way, to connect you. If I have an issue with, say, power, or something, a business has an environmental thing that they've got to work through, I know who to call. I know, and sure, there's still work, and these things take time to form, and the vision and the strategies and the plan. But I can tell you the results we've had in Iron County with the last year of having about 6 different major manufacturers either announce or expand is a reflection of not just David Johnson, hitting the ground running. It's a reflection of David Johnson hitting the ground running and collaborating with my local partners, with my regional partners, and definitely our state partners. And with that, I actually really wanted to dive into something that we've heard a lot about the last few years, but it's becoming even more of a focus. And it's a marketing thing, but it's beyond a marketing thing. And that's One Utah. This phrase, One Utah. We have the One Utah Summit here in Iron County, where the whole state convenes. Yep. It's an economic development focus, a lot of rural focus, but economic, I would say, more than rural. Can you talk about just that philosophy of One Utah, and what does that mean statewide, and what's that mean for Southern Utah as well?
Yeah, and I'll just highlight trade missions as a good example. When we go around the world, we'll have the governor, the speaker, the president, or somebody that represents. We have the House, Senate, the governor, and then higher education typically will come along. And people are blown away that we actually can be in the same room,
work
that
together.
We're supportive of each other, we're friendly with each other.
Yeah.
That, just starting with that as an example, but that is so incredibly unique. And why does that matter? When we're talking about water policy, we're talking about energy policy, AI. I've been heavily involved as formerly a legislator and ran a lot of legislation around these things. For us to be able to get a senator, a member of the governor's office, industry people, higher education people, to pull them in a room and say, this is happening, guys, let's figure this out.
Right.
And we can come together and come up with a plan. That's why Utah, AI, in the world we live in now, technology is moving so fast, the pace of change is so much faster.
Yeah.
And this One Utah concept, I'm starting at the state level, of course, but this One Utah concept has allowed us to be the first in the nation to lead out on some of the most critical technology issues that countries or states are facing and countries are facing. And, I'll use AI as an example, but because of that One Utah concept, we were the first state in the nation. We were even before Europe around any kind of AI policy and doing it the right way.
Right.
Why? Because we brought industry together, legislator, governor, everybody came together. So that's kind of the first step in terms of that. But the other is this concept you've said, which is bringing all the parts of the state. My other role that I have, obviously I do GOEO, which we care deeply about rural, and we push heavily on a lot of our incentives are rural incentives.
Right.
We really feel strongly about we need to see more growth off the Wasatch Front. But my other role in higher education, same concept, is we're supporting at the Point of the Mountain Convergence Hall. We're building out the Innovation District as part of my role. And the first thing we've said from the very beginning is, if this is only a benefit to the Wasatch Front, we have failed. This is a state initiative. How do we make sure that Utah Tech and SUU and all of our tech colleges, and so we do a lot to try to create that coordination. And so some of the things that are happening on the Wasatch Front really are beneficial to businesses, having capital, for instance, like having mentorship, a lot of those kind of things. Because there's such a large mass, you get access to a lot of those things that maybe you don't have as much in say, Southern Utah. We're trying to bring as much of that as we can down. So, for instance, our startup day, we're doing a big builder day with Tyler that's running our startup state. We're trying to bring as much of that support and infrastructure and connections to Southern Utah. We don't want to have everybody have to move up to Salt Lake. We want them we want to come to where they are. And so I think that, again, meets with that One Utah. So the higher education system, the industry partnership, and then just government as a whole.
Yeah.
We can move at a much faster pace because of that One Utah philosophy.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, do you want to kind of give a plug on that Builders Day and what's the intent behind that?
Yeah, so it's exactly that concept is for startup businesses. I'm going back to my startup. I was very fortunate when I started a company. I had a professor of mine who had built and sold a company that I could lean on. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was 24 years old. I was throwing stuff on credit cards. And I had somebody that I could turn to and say, hey, how did you deal with this? How did you work through this issue? And for me, I don't know if I would have been successful if I hadn't had that. And so the whole idea of this Builders Day is let's bring that networking, that mentoring, get some of the best, most successful entrepreneurs there to talk about their experiences, and then bring mentors in to help support them. Programs, all the different kinds of programs. And GoEO, we run a number of other grants, and USBCI, for instance, is a great one that small businesses can take advantage of. They're not quite ready to get bank funding yet. The bank's not ready to bank them. Well, we can help augment a little bit of that so that they can get their first loan.
Yeah.
Those are some critical things that I don't know if a lot of small businesses know. So by us bringing, that kind of whole team down to St. George, which we're doing January 27th, to bring that down and bringing all that ecosystem, the whole idea is how do we help support these local businesses that are trying to get off the ground?
Yeah. And talking about that, that's right. I mean, maybe there's some cases, but most businesses don't just start off as a multi-million-dollar business unless it's like Meta saying, hey, I want to start an additional business, right? Most of them start with a little concept trying to fulfill a need that's not being fulfilled out there, or an idea that's new in concept. In fact, so rural counties throughout the state through GoEO get $200,000. And the majority of, in Iron County, of what we do, and our Iron County Economic Development Board puts that toward mostly small business development. Our Business and Innovation Center gets a fourth of that. And that goes toward these maker spaces where small businesses can come in, get free business consulting, and have space to use 3D printers, create commercials in a little room. I mean, and that's what I meant earlier when I was talking about small business support looks different than these large-scale manufacturers who have these, in post-performance incentives over a 15-year period or whatever. It's just a different dynamic. But if you'll indulge me, I really want to digress more with you. You've mentioned this startup business that you did when you were 24. I would love to hear more about what was that business?
Yeah.
What were some of the aches and pains about it? Because that's a great way to get to know you and for people to hear Jeff knows what you're going through here.
The blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah. Please indulge me.
When I just, even before that, I did a couple startups in college even. As a student, created a little tech company, web marketing company. That was my first business.
What was that called?
Rent-A-Mark.
Okay.
And we just did marketing consulting. Basically, I would hire students at $10 and I'd charge $30. And I had a team lead and I had about 10 students that basically did portfolio work for me.
Wow.
So that was my first little business. And then I jumped from that to my first real company was another startup. They had developed a technology and I was their first employee. So they'd put a lot of money into mortgaged the house and did all that and built the technology, and they were ready to now go market, and I was their first salesperson. So I did that also while I was still in college. And so I did those two things, and then I had a friend who was living on my couch actually at the time that needed a place to crash, and he'd been developing these cool leather journals.
That's how every good business starts, as a friend crashing on someone's couch.
Well, and he couldn't pay rent, so he would buy us Oreo cookies, and so that was his rent payment because he was poor. Anyway, but he was a really creative guy, but not a business guy at all. And so I was still doing this tech software company where I was helping get that going. And so he was on my couch and he was making these journals, and I just said, those are really cool. We should figure out how to try to build this into a company. And handmade, literally everything, hand torn, we'd hand cut out with razor blades, hand punch everything. And obviously that would be very expensive to do one at a time. The process is very slow. And so I saw that and I thought, wait, what if we could scale this up, get the supply chain process faster? When I say that, it was like instead of one person, we'd have three. And then go out and try to market this to where we could get some economies of scale, because I thought the product was really cool. So we first started that, and it was myself and another one of my roommates, and I was still doing my other company. I was an owner, but an employee. But we were able to sublease an office, and we would do their janitorial work. That's how we paid our lease, because they just had an empty office there.
Love it.
And it just happened to be in the same office as my other, so I could do my sales job, and whenever I had a phone call, I could run to my other office to do that. But anyway, we started it. I started doing it. We were making it by hand, so we did small batch, but we'd go out and hit different resort locations.
Wow!
And started selling them there. As I was talking to somebody at one of the companies one of the businesses that we're trying to sell to. Hey, where do you buy your products? I learned about how they did trade shows.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, we started doing trade shows, did 7 or 8. Then we got into the promotional space, landed a big project with Disney.
Wow.
$20,000 project. That's when I jumped on full time. And then the three of us built it from there. Yeah.
That is so awesome.
So we had about 1,000 stores around the U.S., actually some all across the country or outside of the country.
What was that called?
Rustico.
Rustico?
Yeah. So we built that, and then I wanted to go back and get a business degree. Uh-huh. So I sold that a couple years later.
Wow, that's so
awesome. I've been through all the blood, sweat, and tears, and especially in manufacturing. We were manufacturing in 2001, 2002, and at that point everybody was going offshore.
Yeah.
And at the time it was a competitive disadvantage. But what we were able to do is we could turn products really quickly, and they were custom made in the U.S. And there were still people that cared about that. But for a lot of the promotional stuff, they didn't have 3 months to wait. And so even though we charged a high premium, we could turn our product a lot quicker.
Right.
And so we actually were able to build a pretty successful company with very high margins because we were manufacturing in the States.
That is so awesome. When you were talking about the first one you did, where you would charge, or you would pay 10 and you would charge 30 or whatever, I immediately thought of the classic story of Tom Sawyer and his punishment to paint the fence, and he gets the other kids to come along and paint the fence. And everybody, this has always been my opinion of that classic story, is people, and that is always conveyed as Tom Sawyer being lazy, trying to get out of work. But I've always looked at that story and thought, he is smart. He is an entrepreneur.
I love the way you look at that. Yeah.
Not only did he go, I could get this job done faster, but I can create some buy-in and get people not only that want to help me, but want to do it for me. I'm like, what a genius. That story is I've always looked at that as just genius entrepreneurship, and doing something more faster and efficient with more hands make light work kind of a thing. Anyway, so you made me think of that.
I think that's great. You should do some kind of a presentation about how
I should
apply Tom Sawyer to
that.
I love it. Well, and interestingly, I just did it. I just always have wanted to be an entrepreneur. That's still in my nature, right? I still run a fund where we invest in entrepreneurs, but for me, it was also great because these students were getting portfolio work. And so, yes, they were getting paid and it was a business, but then they could actually, as a student, go, hey, I've done real work. Right. And so that actually helped a lot of these students. Of course, I only did it for a year. It was a small business. But the students we had actually helped them land great jobs because they'd had real experience, not just school experience.
Yeah. Speaking of students, that's actually a good segue. So how did you go from... You were doing these businesses, selling these businesses, and then for quite a while, you worked for Utah Valley University, and you helped initiate some student initiatives. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So after I went to do my MBA at BYU, and while I was there, I was part of a venture capital program, so I learned some things through that program, which I'll tie back to UVU. I actually went from there to work for an investment bank in San Francisco. So I worked there for a few years. And while I was out there, I was actually pulled into UVU, and I was managing high net worth institutional money. And President Holland at UVU...
Who was the first president when it became a university, right?
Yeah. He actually asked me to come in and take a look at their endowment. Can you help us see if we're managing this properly? Came in and said, no, you're not managing it properly. Here's how I would do it differently. And this is this is President Holland for you. But he said, great, why don't you come help us get this going? Yeah. And I said, President, I live in San Francisco. My wife was an alum of UVU, but I didn't have any direct connection. But anyway, that's how I first got tied into UVU, is I was actually so for 5 years, I stood up the investment committee. One thing I did say is I want to stand up my own committee. And so we stood up an investment committee, and we redid the whole portfolio. So we changed the portfolio, hired a new money manager, so I was running the endowment for 5 years, and I'd actually shifted to KeyBank, to their private bank, so similar to what I was doing at Credit Suisse, and got this crazy idea to go run for the legislature.
Yeah.
And the problem was at the time that the legislature, most investment firms can't have you leave for 7 weeks. The markets don't just shut down, right?
Yeah.
And so I needed a job that would allow me to still be a legislator. And so UVU had been trying for a while to hire me to come in-house to manage the endowment and the foundation. So that's when I shifted gears and worked in higher ed. And so I did that for 5 years where I was over advancement. So I was AVP of advancement, running the endowment and the foundation. And while I was there, though, I did launch 2 programs that you mentioned, and that's why I brought up the Cougar Capital, as we kind of modeled it after BYU. But we launched a student venture fund. So I went out and raised $500,000 of private dollars that we put in, and then we created a whole program where we would teach students how to become venture capitalists. And the students actually are the ones that get to do the due diligence.
Yeah.
I would go source the deals. So I would go get venture funds to help us get opportunities into the deals, but we would train students how to be VCs, and they would be the ones that would then go pitch it to an investment committee. But they're doing live deals, doing real research alongside an entrepreneur. They're calling the CEO, gathering real information, real time, as we're trying to assess if we want to do those investments. So we built it's called the Wolverine Fund. And then the other program we launched was an innovation program, kind of around design thinking, kind of modeled after what Stanford does on their design thinking program. But we wanted to get different students from different disciplines together to help solve problems. So give them that critical thinking, problem-solving skill, but we also, again, made it a live experience. So we'd go find businesses or government or nonprofits that had a big problem to solve, and then we'd bring a team of students in to help solve the problem.
Yeah.
And so I started with 8 students. Again, I created the program and got it going. Now I just talked to them. There's 260 students right now that are doing that program at UVU.
That has
so
got
it's
to
turned
be
into
so
a really
cool.
cool program. Yeah.
Just to have to go from, and well, obviously you've done this several times with businesses and other things, but to have something go from concept to just very successful, and especially, it's one thing to do it like for a business, and you're making good money, creating a successful business and selling it, but there's also something so special about creating something that really helps and benefits others, and particularly the upcoming generation. Diving into these things.
And that's part of what I still do is my other role, right? I still work within the USHE system. We run a venture fund now, $40 million venture fund that commercializes research out of universities. And I have a team of 25 student analysts from undergrads up to PhDs. We have students from SUU, from Utah Tech. So they're all over the state.
Yeah.
But they're the same concept. So we're doing it now at the state level, but doing this more deep tech commercialization.
Yeah.
And so I love that. I love working with students. But to your point, you get somebody like these PhD students, they've been a total academic route.
Yeah.
And you give them all this training on venture capital, and they start learning what businesses, how they work and what makes them successful.
The practical.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, all of these students that were thinking maybe traditional academia, they're mostly going to work for startups now.
Wow.
In these deep tech spaces, or going to work for venture funds. And having this combination of this great PhD experience, but venture capital. But then we also work with students across the state, and that was intentional because these programs aren't all over the state. There's a few schools that have them, but Utah Tech and SUU, we give students that may not otherwise have that type of a fund experience still be able to be part of something. The other part that's really fun about that is having these students from all over the state. They don't actually ever come physically together. Everything's virtual.
Yeah.
But they become good friends with these students from all over the different schools. Yeah. And so they've even created some cool collaboration outside of the program just because of the way we've brought them together.
Right. I love that. That is so cool. Another digression I want to go on for just a little bit. You and I've realized as I've gone back and kind of looked at your career, you and I have almost crossed paths a few times. And the closest we got before this recently was I was the Economic Development Director and Public Relations Director for Saratoga Springs. Mm-hmm. And just a few years before that, you were also a city council person.
Yeah.
How long did you do that
4
role?
years.
And to talk to me about kind of on because a lot of people that are listening are, people say local government is the government of the people, right? Mm-hmm. It's where things get done. Tell me about lessons you learned as a city council person and how you've been able to translate that moving up to a legislator, and now as the executive director for GOEO.
Yeah, well, and I have a deep appreciation for city councils. It is the government of the people, and it is definitely more directly impactful than even though we hear a lot more at the federal level and hear more at the state. Nothing has more of an impact on your life than your local city council.
Yeah.
And it's where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yep,
You're dealing with the real issues of roads and water and sewer, policing. So I was there. I think there were about 7,000 people in Saratoga Springs when I started.
It was a startup city.
It was, and I had just actually sold my company, and I was just going into business school, and they put out an ad in the paper that said that nobody had applied to be on the city council. This is back when we had the paper.
Yeah.
Right? You don't think about that now, right?
Yeah.
But they actually had a newspaper. But anyway, I just felt like maybe some of my skills of having built a company, maybe I could help out. The city was growing very fast. I came in 2006. At the time, the city was doing well because we had so much growth. But the challenges, of course, is we were heavily dependent on a lot of the growth for the revenues in the city.
Yeah, right.
And so we had some issues, of course, when the housing recession hit. Is a lot of our business, our housing stopped, and that was a big part of our revenue driver. So we actually had to go through some major restructure there. We cut a third of our workforce at the city and had to raise taxes because we were still an agricultural tax base. But the other one was economic development. At the time, we just had a Smith's and a couple other stores.
Right.
And so we desperately needed to balance. Like we had to raise taxes, one of them, which was not pleasant. But we had a police department, all these other services that we had to provide. But that's when economic development became a big critical issue.
Right.
And so how do we position ourselves as a city? And so we started getting a lot more aggressive of going out, and this is prior to you, of course, and it really took off. But anyway, having to go through that, I think does give me a lot of appreciation of what some of these smaller cities are dealing with.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of them, the tax revenue is so critical to pay for their basic services, and economic development plays such an important role in that. So how do you position your city? How do you play to strengths? And I love that, each of our communities down here have come up with ways that they can really position themselves with different things that are, specific to their area. And how do we lean in on that? Saratoga, we had to do some of the same. We're right off the Wasatch Front, but some people felt like it was so far away. Yeah. So we had to help people see that it wasn't that far away. And then transportation. How do we figure out how to pay for that transportation? And so getting creative around all of that, I learned a ton. And so I think as I took that up to the legislature, I think it was very helpful for me through the lens of a local city. Yeah. And then even more as I'm looking through the lens of GOEO, having known what it's like on that really low end, not low end, but like the city end. Yeah. You have a deeper appreciation for the challenges that they face. Yeah.
And I appreciate that because a lot of, I don't know if complaints is the right word, but one of the things that's really important to a lot of cities, like city staff, city managers, things like that, is it used to be a lot of the legislature used to be former mayors, city councilmen who really understood where the rubber meets the road, and so there's just an appreciation from cities, local municipalities, when those legislators have sat on city councils, have been mayors, because then when there's something that comes up that maybe the state wants to implement to cities, there's an understanding, well, how are cities going to fund this? And I don't want to get way too into politics of that, but there's an appreciation for legislators, just like there's an appreciation for, your position, knowing what it's like to do a startup business, right? There's just this connection and this vision that otherwise others may not have. Yeah. Anyways, I'm blabbing a little.
No, but I think I really appreciate you saying that, and I think there's even been an active effort to try to recruit from people that have been through that, and I think that's often kind of a normal progression. Yeah, that they've been at maybe a school district or a city or a county level. But I agree. I think it's critical. And then having the rural perspective. I mean, yes, there were challenges that we faced in Saratoga Springs. We were still a small, growing city, but being on the Wasatch Front obviously has different issues than being in rural. And so I appreciate when you have people who've been on the local level that really understand that from different parts of the state.
Yeah.
I do believe the state does try pretty hard to bring those perspectives in. Right. And you have some incredible legislators from Southern Utah that do really make an impact and do a great job of representing some of the challenges that you guys do face off the Wasatch Front.
Yeah, it's tying back into what we were talking about in the beginning about the One Utah and the collaboration. I mean, I can call any of our local representatives at any time and have them at the table. If we have a business coming in, just in Enoch, which is in Iron County, for those that don't know, was doing meeting with big wigs from, and I say big wigs, but I mean meeting with the CEO and chairman and the president of Ellis Electric. That's a multi-billion-dollar international company. Our local representatives were there at the table, helping support and welcoming them and guiding through what their expansion of what they want to do. I mean, that is so important. And I get that all the time. You said this earlier. We also get that all the time is people are just like dumbfounded, like, whoa, we've got all these people at the table. And I like to joke, we know how to roll out the red carpet, right? And I don't want to leave questions for later. I want to make sure that you have the right people at the table. And that's one of my philosophies is David Johnson doesn't know everything, but David Johnson knows who to bring to the table to help address what you need to take care of, right?
Well, and just to kind of anecdotally add to that, we just did a big project, Valor Atomic, which is doing a small modular reactor. We've got some incredible things happening in the energy space in Utah. And they had 22 companies. They're aggressively getting they were, 22 different states were aggressively trying to recruit them. And I asked him, why did you end up in Utah? And he said, because within 2 weeks, I could talk to everybody that I needed to. I got in touch with each of the people that had a decision-making, part of the decision-making process.
Right.
And nobody moves at that pace.
Yeah.
And so the fact I could do that, I knew I needed to be in Utah.
Yeah.
We're not, we do great in terms of incentives, but we're not always the best, right? There's other states that are willing to offer a lot more. But what a lot of these companies need is that collaboration, that speed, the tying into the different pieces. That is something I think Utah absolutely can lead out on with any other state in the country.
I totally agree with that. And in fact, kind of anecdotally as well, kind of building on that, when I did economic development in Saratoga Springs, people are vying for, like, retail was a huge thing. And there was, we knew everybody in the area knew Costco wanted another Costco in the area. And honestly, we offered half the incentives as our neighbors. But it was the relationships and the connections that we made, understanding what they wanted and not trying to force it, but trying to say, hey, we're here. We know you're looking around, but here's what we can offer you. And we know our incentive isn't as much as some of these, but we're also trying to be responsible to our taxpayers. And that's a lot of what Utah does is post-performance, right? Which is, in my opinion, more fiscally responsible way of doing incentives. But it's those relationships. It's that quick response. And that's one of the things that I really love about Iron County. When I got here, I always joke that in most places, you're fighting to get people to work together. But in Iron County, there was so much collaboration. We have collaboration groups that are almost doing the same thing that this collaboration group is. And you go from one collaboration group to the other, and you're like, wait, aren't all of you also on this other collaboration group? And it's a much better problem to have when you've got excess collaboration as opposed to excess siloing, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Which is a great segue to talk about recently, and I've mentioned this a few times on the podcast, and we'll have them on too. But GOEO was a huge supporter in helping Southern Utah expand the Southern Utah Economic Alliance. And my shtick or my pitch to everyone on that has been, let's establish Southern Utah as Utah's second major Western market. That Utah will have two major Western markets. And GOEO really caught the vision behind that and has been very supportive. And us collectively have worked on that. And I'm blabbing because I'm kind of overly teeing this up. But I would really love to hear your thoughts on exactly that, how Utah is really putting the flag in the ground of we're going to have a second major Western market here in the state, and we're going to bookend the state with these two major Western markets.
Well, and I appreciate that. And just to again compliment and add to everything that you're doing here, one is that you really have come together. I think it was more siloed. I think obviously there's still things we can do to make it better.
Sure, yeah.
But it definitely feels like there's more collaboration than I've ever seen. And I do think that Southern Utah Economic Alliance is really playing a critical role in that, because that's important. You bring the business community, bring the government people, like bring everyone together, and trying to coordinate. The Northern Utah version of this, they have done such an incredible job. And they have legislators, they've got city council members, county commissioners, all their local people and all those businesses, and they have really nailed that model. And so seeing that happening here is so critical, and I love it. The other thing is that success breeds success. And I think the fact that you guys have done such a great job having some great wins early on, which were critical, right? You guys have done an amazing job, and your partnerships, even with the Inland Port, with BZI, for instance. But that just continues to create that story.
Yeah.
Right. It's what then you start hearing more about it, and it adds
synergy.
More.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just, everybody's the same. I don't know if it's FOMO or what, but you want to be part of the up and coming thing. Yeah. You want to be on that track. Right. Mm-hmm. And when you see things going well and you're able to get that message out there of, look, you've got a lot of amazing things that are happening. Again, geographically, there's things that you guys have. I'm looking through that lens of energy and minerals. I mean, there is so much stuff that's happening down here right now, coupling with all the great traditional manufacturing and tech that's happening.
Yeah.
But all of that comes together to tell that great story. And then I keep going back to the workforce. I don't know of any other place in the state where they have worked so well together with our tech colleges, with Southwest and Dixie Tech, with our universities, and being able to build more nimbleness and connectivity between that for your workforce needs. To me, that is another one of those competitive advantages. I don't know anywhere in the state that has that much collaboration, coordination.
On that specific note, I would go as far as anywhere else in the country, because we had Utah Tech, Southern Utah University, Snow College, and our tech schools all get together and submit for an EDA grant a little bit ago, specifically to address filling the workforce pipeline. And EDA looked at that and said, we've never seen multiple universities come together and say, we're going to work together. Rather than fighting over the funding, we're going to work together and implement this program, in a broad, over a broad region. Like, that's just unheard of. And that's why I say, our universities, they're not bringing in property tax, but they're creating jobs, and they're creating jobs for their organizations themselves, as well as driving the workforce pipeline. That's so critical. When I bring in a site selector and I bring in a company, you better believe I not only have the utilities at the table and our elected officials, but the president of SUU, the president of Southwest Tech are both sitting at that table. And they're talking about not only how we're collaborating here, they're talking about the custom fit, the statewide custom fit program, and how Southwest Tech implements that, and they can get up to 40% reimbursement on job training. Anyways, I'm going off on it, but I get
you're
excited.
Absolutely right. And if you talk to most businesses, that's one of their top concerns.
Yeah.
Right now is workforce. Anywhere you go in the country, do you have the workforce?
Yeah.
The great thing is Utah is standing out more than ever. Fastest growing economy. I mean, we have all the accolades. We go all over the world. We tell everybody, and it's great. Our jobs as economic development people, I hate to say it, but they're much easier than most states because of everything that's happened.
Right.
And it's because of great people who went before us that have put the right policies in place, that entrepreneurial spirit we have that just is just permeated around our state.
Right.
And so we have the benefit of that, right? To the point of success breeds success. More and more people are like, what is going on in Utah?
Right.
Why is Utah doing so well? And then even within Utah, to the point of like, when we hear things that are going really well in Iron County, for instance, more people are hearing about that. What's going on down there? There's more there that people are starting to hear about.
Yeah.
And so I think it's great. It's a great time to be in Utah. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about those who go before us, and I've given a shout out more times than probably Danny Stewart cares for, but Danny Stewart really laid a foundation not only for me stepping into this position, but laid a foundation that's actually had an effect statewide with helping establish the first rural inland port subport to the Utah Inland Port Authority, which now I think there's 13 other rural inland ports. And Danny would never take credit for it, and that's because it was a team of people. Yep. He did exactly what I described. He pulled together the right people, and with that, then he moved in the Utah Inland Port, opened the door for me, and now Danny and I, we tag team all the time. We have twice the manpower that Danny had on his own before, you know, and that's the power. That's this synergy. One of the things too about Utah and Iron County really is kind of a poster child for this. I should say a quiet poster child. I'm making it a poster child for this. Is you know, when it comes to workforce, companies will look in Utah and they'll say, well, for example, Costco. They want 110,000 population in a 5-mile radius. Mm-hmm. Well, when I got Costco in Saratoga Springs, the entire population of Saratoga Springs at that time was only 28,000. And I said, well, but if you look outside your stereotypical 5-mile radius analysis that works in other markets but doesn't work in Utah, and I showed them how they would get that 110,000 by the time they opened their doors, they went, oh. Mm-hmm. And guess what now? Saratoga Springs, 70,000 people. Yeah. That's not for me. That growth was already coming, but I helped them show. Yeah,
see the vision of what it was going to be. Yep.
Well, Iron County, people are always shocked when I say we have the #1 grossing Walmart in the state and #2 in visitation. They go, what? I said, well, that's because people drive from a 90-minute radius to shop here, to work here. When we have a new manufacturer come and they need 30 jobs, they get 300 applications. And so telling that story, not only about Iron County, but about Utah, our dynamic is different. Your stereotypical market analysis might not make sense here, but let me show you how you're still going to get your ROI and probably far exceed what you are needing. Anyways, I don't know if you've had experience with that too.
I think that's great. And even though as a state, we're growing into a medium-sized state, we're still seen as a relatively small market.
Yeah.
But the fact that we are the fastest growing population, fastest growing economy, I think people are seeing that vision of what it could be.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, that means we have to also manage the growth.
Yeah.
Right. We love the economy doing well. We love that we need jobs. I can tell you confidently we would rather have the challenge of growth than not growth.
Yeah.
As we talk to our counterparts around the country, people are very envious of us, but also thinking through that lens of we want to continue to provide that vision, but also make sure that we're managing it in the right way.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that the growth is happening in a good way that's going to benefit all of our citizens,
right?
And not create these additional, which we're seeing some of those challenges. And I think that's another role, just to kind of go back to what you were saying earlier, is potentially GOEO might have a more active role on the housing piece.
Right.
And that's becoming more of a relevant issue when it comes to economic development.
It is, yeah.
And so they're looking, the legislature, the governor are looking and saying, how do we make sure that these two conversations aren't happening independently?
Right, that they're balancing with each other.
Yeah, how do we do the growth, but at the same time, how do we make sure that it's still livability? Right. Even within as I came on, we've been building out our new strategic plan for our office, and we're still building that out. But one of the things we really are focused on is livability, not just economic growth, but livability. Mm-hmm. So quality of life, and how do we ensure that we're doing it in the right way, providing the right incentives that continue to support the economy, but at the same time, how do we make sure that we're looking at that bigger picture? Yeah. We're not. I mean, unfortunately, some of those challenges happen. We've grown so fast in some areas that transportation hasn't kept up.
Right.
So we've got to be thinking more creatively around how do we do more multimodal? How do we do more, transportation zones? Different ways that we could provide maybe a smarter way to do growth while at the same time keeping our economy growing.
Well, that's one of the things I say all the time, and I've said on this podcast a few times, is planning isn't telling growth to come. Planning is saying when and if growth comes, here's what we want it to look like. Yep. It's getting ahead of that. And if you plan smart, you can keep the integrity of what you love about your community. But not planning and saying, well, let everybody do what they want. Well, that's when you get the problems that people get upset about. And then they go back and they go, well, why didn't we plan this better?
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's what we were trying to do before is plan it. So I want to be respectful of your time. Yeah. But I do want to kind of end on a couple things. One, I would love the very end for you to talk about recommendations that you have for maybe Southern Utah and everything. But before I do that, I really want to give you the opportunity to highlight there are major industry priorities that the governor's office and the governor's office of economic opportunities focus on. I want you to be able to highlight those priorities and maybe talk about how they're shifting or where you're going with those priorities.
Well, in terms of the targeted industries, we actually are staying similar to what we've had. Okay. I would say the one change that we're focusing on is energy and minerals, which 4 years ago, whenever we did the last, was not really a topic. I mean, it was important, but it wasn't the top priority or
Project
high priority.
Gigawatt's probably driving a lot of that too.
Operation Gigawatt, Operation, it's a huge part of it. It's not only relevant from a perspective of we need energy. Obviously, we need energy, but it's also going to be an economic development driver.
Yeah,
is so many of these companies that want to produce energy because of our regulatory environment, because of the way all the things we just talked about, that they have great workforce. More and more of those companies are saying we need to come to Utah. And so I think that's going to be an important, maybe a little bit of a shift. The other one is just, in this coordination, and I have mentioned this, but I'm on the board of the Port, I'm on the board of the Point, I'm on the board of MITA, so I've experienced a lot of this even before I was in this role. But there was a lot of really good things that were happening. But as I mentioned, they were still kind of in a silo. And there was some, discussion last legislative session about maybe bringing all those under one entity, and that's really not where we're headed. What it is more than anything is we just needed a quarterback. We needed somebody that really understood all these different pieces, that really could be that convener, coordinators we've been mentioning. But to me, I see these as incredible tools. I love what the Inland Port's doing. Probably one of our biggest economic development opportunities. And we love when we have a company that comes in and we're talking to them and they say, these are the things we're looking for. And we can say, Iron County, for instance, you're a perfect fit for this area for these reasons.
Right.
These are the, and I love, I had this conversation just yesterday, but also knowing what the needs of the local businesses are of other kind of companies that would really help complement them.
Right.
And so really that's where the more we can learn through that process and working with different organizations, then it makes it we can be even more strategic in how we're approaching that.
Yeah.
The other piece I just wanted to hit on is we're looking through the lens of, I bring this up because you talked about tourism, but we kind of look at it in terms of where are we going in our state through economic development. We've got like 3, I wish I could almost draft it out, but if you did a Venn diagram, you've got the innovation economy, which is really critical to the state. That's the startup, it's commercialization, it's everything we're doing around kind of the innovation economy. We've got the creative economy, and there's so many great things that are happening there. A lot of these companies, I mean, they've been an economic development addition, but not a lot of people think of it through that lens.
Right.
But so many of our entrepreneurs come from a creative background.
Yeah.
And then we've got the experience economy, which is outdoor recreation and tourism and the film or the sports commission, all of the sporting events. We're looking at that through the lens of how do we really bring those 3 more together intentionally and leveraging the great things that they're doing. That to me is kind of the future of where the state of Utah needs to go.
I love that. A great example of that here is our Utah Shakespeare Festival, where you have a lot of that together, and a lot of people will come out here because they want to experience the outdoors. They want to go to some Shakespeare, and so it's an economic driver, and a lot of times people don't think of it in those terms, but that's why our Office of Tourism and myself, we partner together quite often because we recognize that economic development is the best. Economic development is a diverse portfolio, a holistic approach, and seeing how Venn diagrams, excellent way to say that, of how do these things overlap and how do we strengthen each other and work together on the parts that are cohesive or that overlap.
And to your point, one last thing on that, the Shakespeare Festival is a gem.
I know.
I brought family I have a lot of Canadian family that came when they were younger and hadn't been in a while. I brought them all down this year. and I shared this with President Benson, but they went from here, and they were huge Shakespeare fans. They went to the Globe in London.
Yeah.
And they actually wrote back and said, as good as that was, SUU did it better. Shakespeare Festival at SUU was better. And to me, what a compliment awesome. That you're talking against the best in the world. And they objectively said, what you're doing here is incredible.
Yeah.
So yeah, leveraging that, like what an incredible thing. And then the great things that are coming out of that. How does that drive other elements of your economic development?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, it's probably why our Shakespeare Festival is ranked number 3 in the world.
Yep.
Is because,
doing amazing things.
Yeah. What an incredible program it has. Well, to kind of just round off, I'll let you kind of have some closing thoughts. And if you don't mind, a couple quick things in your closing thoughts and anything else you want to add is what can Southern Utah do to keep building that momentum, to maintain the integrity of what we love here, but really grow that second major Western market, and then holistically in Utah, how you see the vision moving forward?
Yeah, I think you've hit on it pretty well. It's that collaboration. It's not getting siloed, right? Mm-hmm. Looking at yourselves as a region, I think, is actually going to help everyone. Yeah. It's hard when we're cities fighting with cities. I get that. Yeah. But the more people see that as this collaboration with their universities, with the county, I know when we look at through the lens of GOEO, if the city, the county, and the community is not really, really all together, it's harder for us to want to push a project forward. So even at our level, and I know that's the same thing with businesses, they want to know that they've got, wherever they're going, that there's the full support behind them. So I think that playing to your strengths, often people try to duplicate something that's happening somewhere else. And I'm not saying you got to continue to diversify your economy, and there's some great things that are happening here, but really leaning in on the things that you're doing well, and you've got competitive advantages over. Yeah. I think your nimbleness is a huge part of that as well, as I've mentioned. It is harder in other areas around the country, for sure, to have this unified approach. And so how do you continue to lean in on that? Those would be my main things. And then leveraging you, of course, and our team and EDC and all the different organizations that are out there. There's so many resources that are available that as people continue to get to know those community members like yourself, we can just do so much more to help provide that. But we need to continue to leverage those resources. Yeah, I love that. Well, Jefferson, thank you so much. Jefferson Moss with the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, Executive Director. I appreciate your time. We appreciate everything that you're doing in the state and to support Iron County and Southern Utah. Well, thank you for all the great work you're doing. It really is being noticed on a regular basis, all the great things that are happening here. Awesome. Well, we'll talk soon. Okay, thank you.